Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a source today that completely redefines what we might even mean by theory.
Yeah, it's really not an analysis in the usual sense. It reads much more like a comprehensive system architecture document.
For civilizational repair, no less. We're doing a deep dive into Kinwi Lexem, Strive Become Covenant, and it proposes this incredibly rigorous, layered methodology,
hmm
all aimed at post-colonial consolidation and repair.
It's truly a remarkable text, I think, mostly because it moves entirely past the standard academic critique of colonial systems. It just sidesteps that.
Right.
It functions almost like an instruction manual for building a replacement reality, and that mission statement is highly precise, post-coloniality consolidation repairs.
So it's really about moving from, fragmentation and critique towards active generative reengineering.
Exactly, building something new.
And the vocabulary is, well, it's stunningly dense. It feels very purposeful.
It is. It's this fusion, this deliberate blend of theology, advanced linguistics, and systems engineering all wrapped up into their specific methodology.
Which they call kinemagoran etymological hybridization.
That's the one.
And, if you're a listener who sometimes feels overwhelmed by information overload, this text feels like it's almost designed to fight that, to provide a grammar of clarity.
I think that's a good way to put it. And that grammar has a very specific target.
It is.
Refusing the entire basis of Western metaphysical thought. Full stop.
Wow.
They argue that Western grammar, the very structure of how we think and speak, it perpetually recreates the colonial fracture because it relies so heavily on abstraction, separation, distance.
Okay.
So the core mission here, the whole point of this text, is to collapse that distance. They call it reparative suture, healing the wound.
And here's where it gets really interesting right away, I thought. We start with this core metaphor, the hyperorganon. Now, usually we talk about hyperobjects, right? Things too vast, too complex for us to really grasp, like climate change or, global capitalism.
Right, things that feel distant and overwhelming.
But this text just flips that idea completely on its head.
It really does. They strip the hyperorganon of that traditional distance. It's not something far away and purely theoretical. It becomes immediately present.
Oh, so?
It returns as house breath and choreographed nearness. Think about the actual smell of rain hitting dry earth, or the exact weight of a certain tool in your hand, maybe the specific rhythm of a drum beat.
Things you experience directly, bodily.
Precisely. That grounded immediate reality is the vast system, but made manageable, made present.
Okay, so if the hyperorganon is this vast potential, how do they actually bring it down into that immediate grounded reality? What's the mechanism that makes it a functional living organ rather than just some distant object?
Well, that's the specific function of what they call the kinship covenant engine.
The kinship covenant engine, okay.
Yeah. The system basically asserts that this abstract potential only becomes an organ, a living part of the local reality, the ecosystem, when it's hammered into existence.
Hammered.
Yeah, through collective rhythmic effort. The kinship group, the WE in Kinwi, provides the rhythm. They talk about the Stamina-org pulse.
Stamina-org. Like an organ of stamina?
Sort of, yeah. An engine of collective will and energy that runs through everything, from the voices calling prayer to the hands actually building the walls. This covenant engine, it grounds the vast potential into the immediate. It makes the abstract concept workable and, crucially, sacred through that collective will and action.
That initial shift in perspective, moving from distant critique to this immediate, almost sacred kind of engineering, that really sets the tone for this entire framework, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's foundational for everything that follows.
Okay, let's move into the bedrock of this thinking then. Section 2 really deals entirely with the philosophical foundation, starting with how the ground itself is defined. And you mentioned the kinship covenant engine defines the hyperorganon ground. There's that line in the source, kinship hammers rhythm until the wall hums soft. I mean, that perfectly encapsulates this synthesis of the emotional, the communal, and the technical.
It really does. It highlights that the process isn't just, mechanical replacement or construction. It's a form of spiritual engineering.
Spiritual engineering.
And this shift, this physical and metaphysical movement from seeing something as an inert object to understanding it as a living organ, this is what they codify as kinemathesis.
Kinemathesis.
And it's explicitly positioned as far more than just construction. It's a covenant technique.
Okay, a covenant technique. How does that refuse technocracy? Because usually we think of technology as, well, maybe neutral or just functional.
Exactly. And they argue it's never neutral. Kinemathesis refuses technocracy because it requires consent.
Consent. From what?
From the materials themselves. The source describes kinemathesis as a, quote, learning by dwelling where stone consents to liturgy and breath consents to wall.
Wow, so the materials are actual partners in a consecrated craft.
That's the idea. When you lay a foundation, you aren't simply applying physics, Newtonian laws. You are entering into a covenant, a relationship with the rock and the mortar, and it's this spiritual commitment, this vow, that actually fastens and braces the structure against potential for, well, post-colonial collapse.
Okay, this implies the underlying reality, the ontology, must be fundamentally different from the standard Western materialist view.
Completely different.
And that brings us to what they call the flattheoontological insistence.
Exactly. The source material insists, quite forcefully, that the continuum of ontology, the very structure of being, is entirely flat, vital, and processual.
Flat, vital, processual. You mentioned density earlier. This feels like the core density.
It really is. It means there's no hierarchy, none of the usual splits where the spiritual sits above the material or the mind is separate from and above the body. Everything exists on a single living plane, all interconnected.
And what does this flat ontology then demand of language itself? How does it change the function of a word?
It demands that the word itself possesses radical aliveness.
Radical aliveness.
Yes. If the ontology is flat, ontic, sacred, and literal, all those things at once, then the linguistic unit, the word, it isn't merely a symbol for reality. It is reality in a very direct sense.
Okay, I think I see.
And this is absolutely crucial for their goal of post-colonial repair because they're fundamentally refusing the separation, the abstraction that they see as inherent in Western thought.
This philosophical move, it also seems like a very direct confrontation with certain modern academic trends, doesn't it? I noticed their pretty sharp rejection of object-oriented ontology, especially the idea of the object's withdrawal.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very deliberate pivot away from that. Ulos suggests objects withdraw. They're inaccessible to us in their fullness, creating this gap between our perception and the thing itself.
Right.
The Kinwi Lexem's text completely reframes this. They argue the object's withdrawal isn't a void, it's not an absence, it's actually conceal glory.
Conceal glory.
Yeah, it's not withdrawal from us, but rather a kind of neighborliness of the holy, something sacred that actively refuses capture or extraction by human consciousness or systems. It's present, but retains its integrity.
That completely changes the stakes, doesn't it? If the world glow, as they call it, isn't just a metaphor, but an empirical fact of this immanent field,
then every single act, whether it's building or speaking or farming, becomes theologically charged.
Right.
If God soil is literally beneath our feet, then the repair project isn't about, seeking some transcendental escape or hoping for external rescue from above.
It's about acknowledging what's already here.
Exactly. Acknowledging the immanent divinity and treating the world, the soil, the stone, the water as a living, sacred partner. And this naturally radically shifts their approach to human relations and labor as well.
Which is where they move away from abstract concepts like equality, it seems. They replace those standard post-structural equalizations with something called parity and covenant. Why is that distinction so important for them?
Because equality, particularly in a post-structural sense, can often flatten things out, imply sameness or interchangeability.
Okay.
Parity and covenant insists on dignity through task. Specificity matters. Rock, child, rooster, rafters. Each element receives dignity because it has a unique task within the consolidated whole, within the covenant.
So the rock needs to be steady, the child needs to learn and ask, the rooster needs to wake everyone.
Precisely. If one task fails, the whole covenant strains. They are all equally necessary for the whole to function, but they aren't identical or interchangeable.
Right.
This structure ensures every piece of the reality they're building carries immediate, inherent value.
And this emphasis on grounded, lived reality on specific tasks, that's reflected very strongly in their educational philosophy too, isn't it? The Coven-weave pedagogy.
Yes, and it's specifically designed to resist what they call the empire of abstraction.
The empire of abstraction.
Abstraction, in their view, is the native language of coloniality. It allows for distant decision-making, exploitation, resource extraction, precisely because it separates truth from embodied labor, from the local context.
So they insist truth has to congeal closer to home.
Much closer. In the family circle, they say. The child asks, the mother answers, the father amends. Knowledge has to be immediately transmissible, testable, and validated by the kin group, by lived experience.
And this is why they warn against speed, isn't it?
Yeah.
Distant discourse always worships speed. The rush to publish, to globalize, to scale up.
Right, but they emphasize pilgrimage motion tempo.
Pilgrimage motion tempo. Yeah.
Meaning you have to move slowly enough so the path does not outrun the soul. If the word, the concept, doesn't carry the actual grit of the ground it describes, if it doesn't resonate with lived reality, it's rejected. It hasn't earned its place.
It's a very deliberate deceleration then, a kind of resistance to modernity's pace.
Absolutely. Because if you move too fast, the theoretical structure, the plan, it inevitably outpaces the embodied wisdom needed to actually sustain it. The only way they see to achieve this deep consolidation repair is to ensure that the intellectual movement perfectly matches the somatic rhythm, the lived pace of the community.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move into the linguistic section then, because this feels like the operational heart of the whole repair system. This isn't just theory anymore. This is where they actually try to seize the mechanisms of reality creation.
Exactly.
They call it hybrid linguistogenesis and define it pretty boldly as ontological engineering, seizing the means of perceptual ontological production. That's quite a claim.
It is, and it's meant to be. It's based on the recognition that if language, Western language specifically, helped build the colonial fracture.
Then only language, a different kind of language, can suture it shut.
Precisely. They are, quite literally, trying to seize the factory where perception itself is manufactured. You know, the traditional linguist asks us what a word means.
Right. Semantics, etymology.
But the ontological engineer in this framework asks what the word does. What does it do to reality? What does it do to the body?
So the primary linguistic goal is this process they call transvocalization. Moving, for example, between ancestral languages like, say, Mende, then through colonial languages like French, and maybe into global languages like English. But the point isn't linguistic dexterity for its own sake.
Absolutely not. The performance of linguistic mastery just to impress the metropolis, the former colonial center, that's explicitly rejected.
So why do it then? What's the purpose of transvocalization?
The purpose is to coven weave.
Coven weave.
To weave the generations together into a state of mutual hearing. It creates this continuous feedback loop. Call and answer, they say, chest to chest, veranda to courtyard. The word has to resonate across generations, across different linguistic registers simultaneously. That's how it proves its durability, its fitness for the repair project.
So language, before it's academic theory, before it's even just communication, it's morphology, the shaping of form.
Yeah.
I love the analogy they use. Shaping breath as one shapes wit, cement. It have to be patient, repetitive, exact, even sung. The syllables have to carry the weight of the day's work.
The word becomes a tool of physical labor, intrinsically linked to action. And the central tool in this new lexicon, the engine of it all, is the etymoverb.
The etymoverb. Okay, explain that.
It's their term for the hybrid neologism, the newly coined word. But it's not just a noun or a verb in the old sense. It's designed as a linguistic organ.
An organ.
Yes, an organ designed not just to describe action, but to actively generate volition, willpower, movement, stamina, and even joy.
Okay, I have to pause here because this is conceptually, well, it's massive. You mentioned an example earlier, Kenema Gorge. To forge in Kenema by vow. The text insists that this word possesses the same ontic status, the same level of reality as the hammer you might use, or the arm that swings it. Isn't that just spiritualizing jargon? How can a word literally be a tool in that physical sense?
It's a fair question, and the answer goes right back to that flattheoontological insistence we talked about.
Okay.
If the word is radically alive, if it's literally flat ontic, then its acoustic properties, its semantic weight, they are direct inputs into the physical world. They're not separate.
So uttering the word is part of the action.
Exactly. They see the etymoverb as a stamina org, a linguistic engine providing actual kinetic energy. When you utter Kenema Gorge, you aren't just announcing an intention to swing a hammer. You are, in a way, performing the first micro-step of the hammer swing through that acoustic effort. You're generating the initial momentum, both in your own body and within the collective hearing it.
So the word itself acts as an accelerator. It functions as a chronoforge, they say, compressing and shaping time, accelerating competence.
Right, and they insist this acceleration isn't computational. It's not abstract. It's based on metabolic efficiency and pedagogical compression, real-world effects.
This is where the semantic depth really comes in, isn't it? And it seems essential for this goal of post-colonial consolidation, which often requires incredibly rapid cultural and infrastructure rebuilding.
It's absolutely central. The acceleration has to be deeply somatic, rooted in the body. And they employ this concept that sounds quite stark at first. Trauma epistemology weaponized.
Yeah, let's definitely spend a moment on that because weaponizing trauma sounds, well, jarring. But here it seems to be framed therapeutically.
It is therapeutic precisely because it's designed as an anti-pathology mechanism. Trauma epistemology in this specific context refers to the knowledge gained through pain, through suffering.
Okay.
Think of it as high latency, painful data, the data learned from error, from fear, from bodily collapse, from historical wounds. This knowledge is usually incredibly slow and difficult to transmit effectively across generations.
Right. Often it gets lost or has to be relearned the hard way.
Exactly. The etymoverb in this system acts as a data compression tool. It takes that high latency, painful data and converts it into a low latency, easily transmissible linguistic unit, a meta unit they call it.
So wait, instead of every generation having to repeat the same painful mistake, maybe in construction or farming practices or even governance, the elder or the community compresses the wisdom gained from that pain into a single specialized verb.
That's the idea, the meta unit.
And that word is then immediately downloaded, as it were, and understood by the kin group.
Yes, you download the wisdom, the lesson learned, without needing to actually repeat the wound, the original trauma. The word carries the memory, carries the knowledge, but the debilitating pain is neutralized in the compression process.
That is accelerated competence.
It is. And it's how this collective acoustic effort, the use of these etymoverbs, builds what they call the vowel muscle.
The vowel muscle.
Yeah, the shared, quantifiable willpower, the collective stamina needed for the long-term, difficult work of consolidation and repair.
And the most potent tool, maybe the flagship example in this somatic reengineering lexicon, seems to be the word playlosoda. It even sounds kind of joyful.
It's meant to. Playlosoda is explicitly the word designed to mediate between the individual psyche and the required task at hand. It's not just about overcoming obstacles. It's about fundamentally re-engineering the libidinal economy of the community.
The libidinal economy.
Yeah, they frame it as a libido graft.
The libido graft.
Oh.
Okay, that implies taking energy from one source and intentionally attaching it, grafting it onto another.
That's precisely the concept. In a post-colonial context, they argue a vast amount of psychic energy libido, in that broad Freudian sense of life energy, drive is trapped. Trapped in what they call the colonial archive of lack and resentment.
So energy wasted on obsessing over what was lost, what was stolen, focusing on the damage, the resentment towards the colonizer.
Exactly. That energy is locked up, unproductive. Playlosoda is the tool designed to detach that energy from the archive of lack and graft it directly onto the joyful, productive act of building the new thing, building the kin-we reality.
So you stop asking only what was taken, and you start experiencing genuine productive joy in the act of creation itself.
That's the goal. And the text insists this isn't just, positive thinking or emotional reframing. They claim it's an interoceptive event, something that actually affects the body's chemistry.
How so?
They argue it literally rewires the neuroepistemology. It shifts the dominant cognitive structure away from the fear circuit, which is often hyperactivated by colonial trauma, towards the play circuit. Joy, exploration, creativity. And this is where they introduce the concept of the somatovolt.
Somatovolt, like a unit of measurement.
Exactly. Playlosoda is designed, based on their understanding of psychoneuroimmunology and socioneuroplasticity, to be a quantifiable unit of bodily and immunological liberation.
Seriously.
That's the claim. The successful collective use of the joyful word playlosoda should, theoretically, translate into measurable changes in collective health outcomes, stress reduction, cortisol levels, and collaborative efficiency. The word itself is intended to function as medicine, literally.
The conceptual groundwork here is it's massive. So, okay, now we need to look at how this highly theoretical, very ambitious linguistic work is actually operationalized, made practical.
Right.
This brings us to what they call the delta T22 lexical mechanics, which sounds very technical.
It is. It's the set of precise engineering constraints required to ensure these new words are actually stable, effective, and safe to use. They describe it as symbolic reconstruction therapy for a civilization's dictionary.
Symbolic reconstruction therapy.
Okay, this is where the system gets its rigidity, its quality control. You can't just make up any word that sounds good. Each potential etymoverb has to survive this complex, almost mathematical inversion grid test.
The delta T22 register. register.
Yes. It essentially demands that the word must operate effectively across both the colonial register, the world as it is, and the liberated register, the world being built. And crucially, it must re-eroticize beings as stamenorgic theology.
Meaning it has to foster vitality, collective will, sacred effort.
Exactly. It has to work practically and spiritually. And this construction process involves 5 very precise moves, almost like steps in an algorithm.
Okay, let's walk through them. Move 1 is enteromorphosis, integrating the body's internal signals into the shape of the word itself.
Yes, it's the interoceptive calibration of form. They use these amazing terms like gut form, heart parse, breath sculpt.
Gut form, heart parse.
Yeah, and they're not meant as metaphors. They're structural demands. When you're constructing a new word, its rhythm, its sound profile, its phonotactics, how the sounds fit together, must align with a felt sense of internal well-being and truth within the speaker and the community.
So if the word feels wrong in the body,
Mm-hmm.
stressful, dishonest, awkward when spoken.
It's discarded. The shape of the word must literally consent to the body's natural rhythm, its inherent wisdom.
Okay. Move 2 is covenantal affixation. This sounds like where the ethical load gets bolted on.
That's a good way to put it. You graft specific morphemes, specific word parts, directly onto root words. These affixes carry explicit ethical or ontological weight.
Like the examples. Theo for theological weight, prax for practice action, soma for body, iman for immanence, pneuma for spirit or breath.
Exactly. So when you graft these onto roots, you produce these highly charged, very specific terms like imminact, an action deeply rooted in immanent reality, or praxitect, maybe an architect whose work is inherently practical and ethical, or interpraxminence, perhaps the lived practice of dwelling together in immanence.
And the word itself is designed to make it almost impossible to perform an unethical action without linguistically, visibly breaking the covenant embedded in the word.
That's the intent. The ethics are baked into the grammar.
Okay, move 3 is palimpsestuous retention, keeping the old layers visible in the new.
Yes, ensuring that even the newest lexicon remains deeply tethered to history, to ancestral wisdom. Every new coinage is built upon these layers of history, keeping ancestral shards audible, visible.
They said examples like earthright, soil code, action.
Right. The term palimpsestuous retention means that the ancient wisdom isn't erased or replaced, but it's written over and through, remaining present. Each new word must be legible as a body scripture.
Body scripture.
A living text, traceable back through the community's embodied history, thereby consolidating generations, linking past, present, and future.
This leads to what feels like the most complex ethical hurdle. Move 4, the triune balancing. Balancing law, grace, and glory within a single word. How do you quantitatively or even qualitatively balance abstract theological concepts like law, grace, and glory in the structure of a word? Isn't that just inherently prone to, I don't know, theoretical collapse or endless debate?
It absolutely risks collapse, yes, which is precisely why the balancing mechanism has to be so rigorous. It's described as a symbolic, imaginary, real recoding. It's not simple.
How does it work then, practically?
Every potential new term is rigorously tested against 3 vectors, 3 dimensions. Norm, representing the law, does the word promote ethical structure, order, stability? Gift, representing grace, does it foster undeserved favor, reciprocity, generosity, open-handedness? And radiance, representing glory, does it manifest divine immanence, the world glow, pure joy, beauty?
So if a word is too rigid, too legalistic, too much law.
Or too chaotic, too unstructured, maybe too much ungrounded grace.
Or if it just fails to inspire, fails to manifest that world glow, missing glory.
Then it's rejected. It's deemed unstable, unsuitable for the long-term work of consolidation repair. It has to hold all 3 in dynamic tension.
That makes the whole process sound incredibly slow and deliberate, which I guess fits the pilgrimage tempo idea.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the final hurdle, move 5. Delta T22 Theses. This is the ultimate stress test.
This is the final fidelity test, yes. The stress test across time and scale, the delta T22, sort of hinting at accelerated time or squared impact. The word has to be tested rigorously across 2 distinct registers, the intra and the ultra.
Intra and ultra, meaning
the word must successfully heal or integrate within the intra, that's the individual body, the internal spiritual state, the personal experience. Does it feel right? Does it work for one person?
Oh, yeah.
While simultaneously not collapsing discernment or enabling harm in the ultra. That's the collective liberation project, the societal level, the political sphere.
I see. So if a word makes an individual feel whole and happy, but it somehow facilitates collective injustice or exploitation.
It fails the test. It has to work beneficially on the smallest scale, the individual body, and on the largest scale, societal transformation, simultaneously. Only then is it licensed, approved as a durable tool of consolidation.
Wow, that is a remarkably thorough vetting process for a word.
It's ontological engineering taken very seriously.
Okay, so once this highly engineered lexicon is finally forged, the source moves into kinemagorn praxis. How this grammar actually re-architects an entire civilization. Let's start with Section 5a, Design and Architecture, which gets redefined as vow.
Right. When design itself is understood as a vow, then every beam, every wire, every circuit becomes part of that sacred commitment to the covenant, to the kin we.
So the architecture itself has to be theophanic, manifesting the divine.
Yes. It has to make the sacred visible, tangible. They offer that really evocative example of a veranda that breathes Eucharistic ecology.
Eucharistic ecology.
Meaning the space itself is designed so that every act of consumption within it, sharing a meal, drinking water, leads towards communion, towards shared sustenance and reciprocal nourishment, rather than extraction or depletion. The design itself fosters a specific kind of relationship.
That's a radically different design philosophy. How does that translate into, say, the actual construction process?
The construction charters, the plans, have to encode theotechnical immanence.
Theotechnical immanence.
It means treating the technical components as spiritually integrated. Circuits become sacraments. Sensors become pneumatic spirit actions.
So the wiring diagram isn't just a guide for electricity.
It's also a guide for community energy flow, for spiritual connectivity, for how life moves through the structure. And furthermore, labor itself is spiritualized. They talk about work bless as the state of grace that is achieved through labor, through contribution. So every act of maintenance, sweeping the floor, patching the roof, repairing a solar panel, becomes a liturgy. You maintain the structure not just because it's a functional building, but because it is a manifestation of the covenant, a now shrine.
Okay. Shifting from buildings to governance, Section 5b proposes a really complex political theology. It's not just one ideology, is it? It seems like a specific braiding of three quite different schools of thought.
It is. It's a very deliberate synthesis, again, engineered to try and avoid the known pitfalls of singular ideologies dominating.
So what are the strands?
First, radical orthodoxy. That provides the necessary structural and theological grammar, the high fidelity to tradition, order, metaphysics.
But that can be quite conservative, even reactionary sometimes.
Which is why it's immediately balanced by liberation theology. That strand is crucial to actively shed resentment, to ensure the political project remains focused on deliverance, on justice for the oppressed, rather than becoming merely an inversion of power or seeking revenge against former oppressors.
Okay, so order and justice.
Yeah.
And the third strand, Afro-theology.
Precisely. Afro-theology braids the lived wisdom of elders, the connection to ancestors, the specific spiritual insights of the African diaspora directly into the functional governance structure. It ensures the system is rooted in perennial wisdom, specific cultural context, and generational accountability.
And the result of weaving these three together is what they call theotechnocratic governance.
Right. Where law itself is written as liturgy, as a form of sacred text guiding action. And the immanent divinity, the sacredness within reality, is understood to stay near precisely by exceeding any single human interpretation or control.
But in a world that's, rife with political volatility, how does a system like this maintain stability? They mention opposing drift through radical centrism and harnessing Afro-optimistic accelerationism. That sounds almost like a contradiction. Radical centrism and accelerationism.
It does sound contradictory, but the way they define radical centrism isn't about political fence-sitting or bland compromise.
Yeah.
It's the active, dynamic balancing of polarities, a refusal to be pulled into the extremes of, say, neoliberal abandonment on one side or totalitarian dogma on the other. It's constantly seeking that dynamic equilibrium between law and grace, structure and freedom.
And the Afro-optimist accelerationism part.
That's about harnessing the innate communal energy, the hope, the drive within the community for rapid, sustained consolidation and building, but always beneath the ethical constraint of the covenant vow. It allows for speeding up the building process where needed, but only on that solid foundation of shared moral geometry, not acceleration for its own sake.
Their preferred political structure involves neo-tribalism, but explicitly defined beyond blood ties and post-capitalism based on reciprocity, all situated within multipolar geopolitics, viewed as moral geometry. It's clear they reject global homogenization.
Very clear. Their ultimate social objective seems to be encapsulated in this concept of civic soteriology.
Civic soteriology, collective salvation for the citizen body.
Essentially, yes. And to combat the pervasive trauma of displacement, a key feature of the colonial and post-colonial experience, they introduce another powerful new word. Placemum.
Placebo, like home.
Exactly. It's designed to replace the trauma of displacement, of homelessness. Placebone acts to localize it, makes the specific, concrete local site universally significant sacred. And that act of deep localization, of investing the place with sacred meaning and care, becomes the manifestation of the world glow.
The divine radiance inherent in creation but made manifest here.
Right. So you aren't just protecting your land in a property sense, you are actively manifesting the divine in and through that specific place.
Okay, now let's look at economics, Section 5C. How does a system designed for consolidation repair for the Covington function economically?
Right.
It sounds like they prioritize sufficiency over endless growth.
Absolutely. The entire economy is structured around rhythmic sufficiency, not accumulation. It explicitly practices Sabbath degrowth.
Sabbath degrowth, meaning planned periods of rest and non-production.
Yes, honoring chronobiology, natural cycles, the need for cyclical rest and regeneration. This is a fundamental rejection of the constant linear acceleration demanded by global capitalism.
In commerce itself?
It's spiritualized as work worship. Contracts aren't just legal paper. They're understood as muscle vow, a physical, somatic commitment made by the body and the community. And accounting shifts entirely. They use a gift ledger.
A gift ledger. Okay, what does that actually look like in practice? How do you account for value without standard capital metrics?
The gift ledger accounts primarily for reciprocity, for the flow of energy and resources within the community, and for the restoration of balance, rather than focusing solely on capital accumulation or profit.
So value is measured differently.
Yes. Value might be measured by the restoration of soil health through communal labor, or the successful integration of a new family, or the strengthening of the KIN-WE infrastructure. Those would be positive entries on the gift ledger, tracked alongside, perhaps, material exchanges.
And this structure is designed to actively thwart techno-feudalism.
That's a key goal. By ensuring that critical infrastructure, things like solar arrays, soil regeneration projects, crucial community code is owned and maintained communally by the kin group, it prevents external powers or corporations from extracting rent or controlling the means of survival. It keeps power localized and shared.
Okay, finally, let's bring this whole system back to the individual body and how learning happens in Section 5D. The pedagogy uses the Somaplite lexicon, picking through the skin.
Yes. Somaplite insists that real knowledge begins with the body, with direct sensory experience. The terms themselves are grounded in physical, lived reality. They mention tactinome.
Which is like a classification of intentional gestures, the meaning carried in how you move.
Exactly, and haptognosis, knowing by grasping, by touching, by physical interaction. It's about reclaiming the body as the primary site of knowledge generation, not just a vessel for the brain.
Which means the standard methodological norm becomes feel-think, re-eroticized cognition.
Right. Instead of detached, objective analysis being the ideal, learning is intrinsically tied to sensation, emotion, embodied experience. Cognition is re-eroticized, reconnected to life energy.
And it's completely overhauls pedagogy, doesn't it?
Totally. They replace academic compartmentalization, history here, science there, art somewhere else, with transdisciplinary praxis. Learning is fused with doing, with application in the real world.
And assessment changes too, from tests to praximnesia.
Praximnesia. The question isn't what facts did you memorize, but what awakened within you while you were doing this task? What did you realize in your body, in your spirit?
The school itself transforms into a neurocathedral.
A place intentionally designed, physically and methodologically, to optimize neural function for communal well-being, spiritual insight, and practical consolidation.
And quickly, in healthcare, how does this lexicon approach the massive issue of trauma, especially collective trauma?
It shifts the whole frame. They use the biopsychosocial pneumatic model.
Pneumatic, adding the spiritual dimensions.
Yes, explicitly integrating spiritual health pneuma alongside the biological, psychological, and social factors. And crucially, trauma epistemology shifts entirely. Trauma stops being viewed primarily as pathology, something broken in the individual that needs fixing.
And
It becomes prophecy, a warning, a source of deep knowledge, a guide for collective action and change.
So how is collective trauma reintegrated then?
Not just through individual therapy, though that might play a role. primarily through communal ritual, through song, through shared storytelling using the new lexicon. The healing process itself must be somatic, communal, and directly tied back to building that vow muscle, strengthening the collective will to repair and rebuild.
We've covered so much, the deep ontology, the surgical precision of the delta TT2 mechanics, and this incredibly comprehensive praxis. What we're really left with is this understanding that etymological hybridization for them is the manufacture of a civilization's soul.
That's a powerful way to put it. It aims to turn language, which, let's face it, often feels exhausted by endless critique in academia, back into active praxis, the direct instantiation of spirit within matter, making ideas real.
That really feels like the ultimate project here.
It is. The edema verb is intended as living proof of their core truth, the self-ground. It's the mechanism that makes the philosophical claim literal, tangible. When you utter playlosoda, the goal is that you are literally making the world glow audible, functional, present.
So the flattheoontological aliveness isn't just a concept, it's made literal.
Yes, because the act of creation, what they call art do, is redefined as the highest form of prayer. It's the forging of divinity in the mud, in the code, in the community.
And this entire vast system is predicated on the measurable outcome of that collective acoustic effort, right? The building of that communal vow muscle.
Absolutely. And the sources promise, or at least project, a new equilibrium as the result.
What does that look like?
When citizens become fluent in this new grammar, the claim is that policies will breathe with life, they'll be grounded. When builders utter these specific words, walls will listen and hold fast, embodying the covenant. When parents whisper this lexicon, children will stand rooted, connected.
So the city becomes a now shrine,
The week settles into a Sabbath cadence.
and the economy transforms into a gift ecology.
Language itself becomes the living grammar of redemption, the essential tool for achieving that deep post-colonial consolidation and repair.
It's an incredibly ambitious, holistic vision.
Truly. Which leads to a final thought, perhaps.
Go for it.
If the explicit goal of this entire lexicon, this immense effort, is to build the collective vow muscle and generate pure volition through shared acoustic effort, maybe you could consider what daily common word in your own personal life currently carries the weight of resentment or lack or maybe just obligation, and how might renaming it, trying to infuse it with some of this kinwayui energy, maybe trying to feel it as a somato, how might that begin your own personal somatic reengineering?